Welcome into another edition of NBA Soundsystem Canada. My name is Gil McGregor, joined as always by my guy, Kyle Irving, and this is a production of 604 Podcast Network. As always, we appreciate every single one of you who subscribe to the podcast, whether it is here, wherever you get your podcast, you're watching it on YouTube, and you're following us on Instagram. NBA Soundsystem Canada is the handle. We are back after another week hiatus. We're doing the bi-weekly episodes during the off season, so many more storylines to get to every time we convene. KI, with that in mind, what's up, man? How you feeling?
Feeling good. Couple weeks off. Obviously, football season's underway right now, but as basketball junkies, we are looking for any excuse that we can to break down, preview what's coming up this season. It's a little over a month and a half away. So we're kind of coming down to it. Media days are starting up. I think this week there are a couple teams that have some media days. And then, as of, I think 2 weeks from now, teams are really going to be in full swing there. So, we're going to try and break it down for you conference by conference here. We're going to start with the Eastern Conference today. Got plenty of teams to get through, plenty of teams and players to talk about. But, hey, the season's almost here, man.
Yeah, I was going to say, you beat me to the punch, because I was going to say that by the time you guys hear this, at least on Friday, those of you who listen on Friday, we'll be 13 days away from the first day of NBA preseason. So, we're in final gear mode. It feels like Game 7 of the finals was just happening, and now the NBA preseason is here with a couple international games, and we hit the ground running pretty quickly. Like you said, opening night is a little over a month away from the time you hear this podcast, so it'll be fast approaching, and I guess we can get excited about talking about the Eastern Conference. There are things to be excited about, despite what people may think and despite what people on the outside and what the national TV schedule might say. The Eastern Conference is excited, so I'm excited to dig into that and everything that's going on in the Eastern Conference. Before we get to that, as we always do, a lot of current events, a lot of things happening in the NBA, especially over the past 2 weeks, and the world of basketball. The WNBA playoffs are in full swing by the time you hear this. The series will be satisfied and done and handled, but we have no idea where it's going to go. As we're talking right now, last night, Indiana Fever and Seattle Storm forced decisive Game 3s. Dominique Malonga is the truth, and I will say it now. I didn't want to speak on it too much soon, but 19 years old, making big plays, had the go-ahead basket for her team in Game 2. And the Fever just fighting without Caitlin Clark. We do have two teams with the opportunity to close out tonight. We have the Minnesota Lynx in San Jose to take on the Golden State Valkyries. And then we have the New York Liberty trying to get past the Phoenix Mercury. And one other WNBA note, we're getting awards announcements this week. Again, by the time you hear this, actually, you won't know MVP yet. It's probably going to be Nafisa Collier or Asia Wilson, but we do know Natalie Nakase, Coach of the Year, much deserved. Veronica Burton, Most Improved Player, much deserved. And I want to talk about real quick the Rookie of the Year, Paige Beckers. I think she was everything that we expected her to be in year one, and probably a little more than that too.
Yeah, not unanimous though.
Not unanimous. Shout out to Sonia Citron.
2 votes. Yeah, Sonia Citron had a huge year too. But Paige Beckers, incredible season. It felt like every single night she was doing something historic. She basically set the rookie scoring record with 44 points in that game in LA. Yep. The other rookie that had done it wasn't technically a rookie. She was
wasn't her first year as a pro.
Right. Yeah. She was 29 years old or something like that. And Paige Beckers, she had more 20-point games, 30-point games than everybody in her class, led the class in points per game and assists per game. Just the way that she moves out there, you can just tell she is going to be that next level type of player. And the Steph Curry quote that she stole of I don't know if you saw that, but the old Steph Curry tweet where he was like, it was in 2014 with the Warriors. We're going to fix it soon. Please, Dub Nation, just stick with us. And someone asked her what the silver lining was for the Dallas Wings this year. She was and by the way, she was probably 7 years old when that tweet came out. So that's how you know that she's the chosen one.
She knows she's really,
But she was still somehow tapped into what Steph Curry was doing on Twitter as a 7-year-old. But I give her a ton of respect for, she's just stick with us. We're going to right the ship eventually. And she's that type of, culture builder, building block for a franchise, a player that other players are going to want to play with. I think it low-key makes Dallas a destination just because of who she is and how good she is and how good everyone knows she's going to be. So, Rookie of the Year, well-deserved, but it's just going to be the first trophy that's going into what will eventually be a very, very full trophy cabinet for Paige Beckers.
100%. Yes. Pretty good 2025 for her. Wins national championship, closes her career at UConn, and then comes and wins Rookie of the Year. Also crazy, first time ever
All-star starter.
in the same All-Star starter. First time ever in the same calendar year that the NBA and WNBA Rookie of the Year came from the same school. Stephon Castle and Paige Beckers, both UConn Huskies, win Rookie of the Year in 2025. It's crazy, yeah, right? I went back and looked, and like Emeka Okafor won a year after Diana Taurasi won, even though they finished in the same year, but they didn't have rookie years in the same year. So pretty cool to see that with Paige and Stephon Castle. Cool. I just want to say real quick, talk about the way she moves, man. Like, she is a hooper's hooper. Like, regardless of if you played in middle school, high school, college, wherever you stopped playing, if you played, you appreciate the aesthetic of her game. She's a 3-level scorer. Thinking about the 44-point game she had in LA, I don't remember exactly what it was. It was only like 19 or 20 shots. Like, it was so efficient. Yeah. She knows how to get to her spots. She's a bigger guard. She knows how to score in her back to the basket. She knows how to score going downhill. She knows how to score from the mid-range. She knows how to knock down jumpers, and she knows how to set up her teammates as well. So really fun to watch her, see year one for her. And like we talk about with all these WNBA rookies, they start their careers weeks after they just finished playing, high-level basketball in the NCAA tournament. So imagine how good she's going to be with an offseason to improve. I think she's playing an unrivaled, an offseason to improve, and an offseason to get stronger, and then understand the WNBA game a little more. So like we said, it's only the beginning for her. So really excited for Paige Beckers and the Dallas Wings because, again, it's only up for them too. It's based on where they finish in the standings this year.
Angel Reese, is she going to Dallas?
Listen, I floated out the Angel Reese for Enrique trade. I know she and Paige are close. Chicago could use a guard. They could use a big in Dallas.
I'm just saying.
It wouldn't make sense.
If she does get moved, it makes a lot of sense, and that'd be a lot of talent in Dallas. They could do something with those two.
They could use a player like that, and I think that they would complement each other very well. So here we are putting out rumors that we have no idea could come out, but if they did come out and it does come true to happen, just speculating. But you know what? We're going to clip this if it happens, and it happens in real time, just like we did with our Shea MVP pick and everything else we've gotten right on here. We're going to clip that as well if that ever happens this offseason, but a long offseason ahead. But of course, once they get close to the WNBA finals, things like that, we'll talk about that on here as well. Now, to shift focus back to what we talked about at the top of the show in the Eastern Conference. And, when you and I were talking about the NBA schedule release, one thing I pointed out to you was when we talked about opening night and we talked about Christmas, there's only one matchup that featured Eastern Conference teams, and that's Cleveland and New York at the Garden on Christmas Day. Everything else is all Western Conference. All the spotlight is on the Western Conference, whether it's KD in Houston, whether it's what the heck the Warriors are going to do, whether it's LeBron and Luka, Wemby. We'll talk about that when we preview the Western Conference, but there's a lot of storylines. I spin that back to you to say, when you look at the Eastern Conference, and there are a lot of injuries that hang over the conference, there's a lot of uncertainty around whether teams can contend or not. Is there anything to really be excited about with the Eastern Conference?
I think there is. I think all right, so the past couple of years, right, like it's felt like Boston was a shoo-in to be the best team in the East. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Cleveland was a pretty big surprise last year. Like, everyone knew how good they were. I don't know if everyone knew that they were going to take the leap that they did. Yeah. But I think that there's something in the parity of the East that makes it such an interesting conference this year. Like, yes, Cleveland, I still expect them to be the best team in the East this year. We know that Milwaukee is going to be somewhere near the top. We have no idea what a team like Philly is going to look like because we don't know if Joel Embiid and Paul George can stay healthy. We are excited about teams like Atlanta. You and I have both preached Atlanta on this pod all offseason for everything that they've done. We're excited about teams like Orlando. Correct. They made that move to get Desmond Bane. I expect Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner to take a leap. Jalen Suggs coming back from injury. Like, the pieces are in place there. But you can't concretely say that Atlanta or Orlando are going to win the East. You know what I mean? Could they win the East? Yes, they absolutely could. They have the talent to do it. They have the supporting cast around their stars. But you couldn't say confidently right now they're going to win the Eastern Conference. So the fact that there is a lot of question marks around a lot of the teams at the top of the East, even with, like I said, Cleveland, everyone expects them to be the best team in the East. They haven't made it past the second round in the playoffs. It feels like since LeBron James was there. You know what I mean? And I feel like that is the case. So it's there's no guarantee.
Mitchell never has in his career.
Right. Yeah. So it's it just feels like, even though it feels like certainty that they're going to be the best team in the conference, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be the team that represents the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals. So the fact that there are so many question marks around the top teams, and then you throw in the teams in the mix like Indiana and Boston that we don't really know what to expect from them. Philly, I would throw them in that same bracket of, just because of injuries, I don't know what to expect from them. It gets really interesting to see how the top of the East and the play-in picture is going to shape out.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when you talked about parity And I think back to the years when we just knew it was going to be Miami standing last, or we knew that it was going to be Cleveland standing last when LeBron went to the conference finals 8 straight years. And in the West, we knew it was going to be the Warriors for a little bit of time. I think it's interesting because it does give you that feel of like, man, it's anybody's conference. But then there's like that lack of like excitement behind it, just because I think that subconsciously there is a belief that whoever comes out of the East has no chance of winning the championship. And as we learned in the past, as we learned last year, they play the games for a reason, and teams come out, and who knows if Tyrese Halliburton doesn't go down in the first quarter of game one of the finals, we could be talking a very different story. Obviously he did. The Thunder took care of business, and they're the defending champions. You know, you talked about teams in the Eastern Conference, and I think it's interesting too when you talk about proving yourself, and the Cavaliers stand in front of the line. I don't necessarily think that anybody crowned them too soon. I think that they were humbled earlier than we expected them to be humbled, in a sense of them having that tear they started the season on. And people saying, okay, well, we still have to see it in the playoffs because, you know, Jared Allen will get memed to the end of his career about the lights being brighter than expected. And, you know, maybe he shouldn't have said it, but it is what it is. And I appreciate his candor and honesty. But that kind of happened again. And I'm curious to see. I think Lonzo Ball is a massive under the radar pickup for them because he answers a lot of the questions and things that they have as far as having an undersized backcourt. And if he can give you 15 or 20 minutes in the postseason, that's cool. You know, I think about teams who maybe are on the cusp of making another leap. The Pistons. Many people might have thought that they should have gotten past the Knicks in the first round. They had opportunities to win those games in the first round, but the Knicks had been there before and made more plays. I think for the Pistons, one to go from, 14 wins to being in the playoffs and having a chance to win the playoff series was a big leap. And I think that, I don't think that anything is too great of a leap to say that you can do this or that. But now that they have been there and they've seen those things, kind of reminds me of when Memphis really was, that first year that they had that big leap and they ended up getting past Minnesota and they learned a lot that year. They just ended up running into the Lakers the next year, but they were better suited. I think Detroit will be kind of that kind of team this year where they have a franchise player who is perfect for playoff basketball, and we saw that. And they've been building. I think they had a great offseason as well up there in Detroit. So I'm excited to see what they can do next season. And the Knicks, another one, I think, new head coach, coming up short when everybody thought that they were going to get past Indiana, answering a lot of the questions that they had with their biggest flaws, their depth. And again, I know a lot of that has to do with having a new coach, a new system, a new philosophy on the sideline. But to Tom Thibodeau's defense, to a certain extent, I understand why he didn't necessarily trust some of the guys that he didn't trust. And now bringing in Jordan Clarkson, bringing in Yabu, guys to kind of round out that rotation to add to what they already had in place. It makes the Eastern Conference really intriguing. And I like that you mentioned the Sixers because it's so funny. I've been seeing people on Twitter, react to workout videos and pictures of Joel Embiid with no brace on, like, oh, man, I'm starting to believe. And it's like, they are a massive wild card because if it does click and all the misfortune that they have had in the last 12 years works in their favor, that's scary. So the East is weird. It's cool.
Think about it with the Sixers. Like, am I going to sit here and say Joel Embiid plays 70 games this year? No, I'm not going to do that. But if Joel Embiid does play 70 games this year, that's a really good roster around him. Like, they all of a sudden have stumbled on. I mean, who knows what's going to end up happening with the Quentin Grimes restricted free agency situation. Like, I feel like that's probably headed towards the qualifying offer, and then he'll be a free agent at the end of the year. But now they're going to have him for another year. Tyrese Maxey. In my opinion, it is starting to shift towards Tyrese Maxey's team. The 76ers are starting to shift towards Tyrese Maxey's team because he is the most available star that they have. Jared McCain's coming back from injury. He would have been Rookie of the Year last year. With all due respect to Stephon Castle, Jared McCain would have been Rookie of the Year last year if he stayed healthy the entire season. Like, they have pieces in place to be a solid team. It's just you need your stars to be your stars, and they have not been available. But if Joel Embiid could play 65, 70 games, all of a sudden in a year the Eastern Conference should not be that good, they float to the top. You brought up the Knicks. I mean, Malcolm Brogdon, they signed him over the weekend too. Like, they're bringing in pieces where they can actually play a rotation that is deeper than 7 guys like they did in the playoffs last year. They went to Deuce McBride. They went to Mitchell Robinson. That was pretty much it. Every now and then we would see some Landry Shamet minutes. Like, every now and then, we saw some DeJuan Wright minutes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so now they actually have guys that Mike Brown will be able to utilize and trust. I'm glad you brought up the Pistons. That's another team, like you said, they had all the opportunity in the world to beat the Knicks in the first round last year. Inexperience showed, but I expect Cade Cunningham. I think Cade Cunningham could be a player that receives MVP votes this year if the Pistons are as good as they could be under him. And the season that he had last year was so remarkable, and I expect him to take another step forward. And then something else that intrigues me about the East is you have teams like Toronto that they're getting Brandon Ingram back and healthy. Like, Scotty Barnes, another year of development. It's going to be kind of a weird fit with RJ Barrett and that crew. They're putting a lot of trust in Jakob Poeltl, and Emmanuel Quickley is going to be the one that's running the show at the point. And they have, young guys. They're trying to figure out who they really want to utilize moving forward. And Jamal Shed, Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter, Jonathan Mobo. Like they have, but those are solid rotation pieces that this is a
DNB
team
now.
that should be, and Colin Murray Boyles. Those are players that should, in theory, be able to impact winning and get them into the playing range. The Charlotte Hornets, another team. You look at the roster, not a lot of depth.
Health.
Starting lineup. Health. But could that be a team that makes the play-in tournament? They could be. Yeah. Are they really going to make noise in the playoffs? No, they're not going to. But you know what I mean? That's a new team that has an opportunity to jump into that playing race that was not in it at all last year. I feel like the Wizards are kind of similar in that same boat. Really young team. They're going to throw these guys in the fire. We'll see what happens. They have some vets out there. Maybe they end up trading CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton to contenders to, kind of try and expedite their rebuild a little bit. But it's interesting because of how cloudy the Eastern Conference is. And I'm really, really curious to see what teams kind of emerge out of that cloud of dust to separate themselves in a year that there isn't as much top end talent as there has been in the conference in the past.
Yeah, I do want to get back to that play-in tournament range because I have an interesting way I'll frame that for you. But before that, I kind of want to circle back to what we were talking about with the top end of the Eastern Conference. And I know I said you can't just sit here, especially in September before teams have even convened for training camp. But when you look at the West and we talk about OKC defending their title, and they're going to have Houston to fight with, and Dallas once they get healthy, and Denver to contend with, Minnesota, LA, Lakers and Clippers, right? All these teams are, if you told me that one of them found a way to win the championship next year, I sit and think about it. Maybe longer for some teams than others, but I'm like, I could see that. In the East, right now, as we talk about it, how many teams are there for you where you're like, if I told you the Knicks are going to win next year, you sit and be like, okay, I see it. Year two of Cat and Jalen Brunson, or is it Philly? With things shaking their way, is it Detroit? Is it Atlanta? Is it Giannis just going otherworldly, leading? He just led Greece to a bronze medal at Eurobasket and was very overcome with emotion about that. Realistically speaking, how many teams would it not take you that much convincing as far as winning a championship out of the Eastern Conference next year?
Yeah, that's a good question. Cleveland, right?
Yeah.
New York to me is
okay. Yeah.
Low-key, and we're going to make our predictions at some point. I think the Knicks get back to the NBA Finals for the first time since 1999 this year. I really do.
Okay.
I think Milwaukee is in that conversation just because Giannis has proved that he can at any given moment be the best player in the world or in the conversation for best player.
He's right there.
And when that was kind of your whole thing, going into the playoffs last year. They ended up losing in the first round, but when you have arguably the best player in the world on your team, you're going to have a shot. I would give them some consideration. After that, I can't put Philly in that. I can't put
too much has to go right
just yet.
Yeah,
too much. Right. There's too much that has gone wrong in the past that would have to go right this year for that to happen. I think they could be a surprise team, like I said, if Embiid's healthy. But I can't put them in that category. Atlanta and Orlando are the two where I'm like, I could see it going. I could see it breaking right for one of them. Could it really are we going to see an Atlanta Orlando Eastern Conference Finals? I can't confidently sit here and tell you that. I like both.
My
teams.
brain couldn't imagine that.
No, right? Yeah, that would be so foreign to watch. It would feel so weird. But I like both the teams. I like what both teams did this offseason. I like what they're building. I like what both teams are building. But I could see one of those teams maybe getting to the NBA Finals if things really break in their favor. And then Boston and Indiana, they are. Probably the two biggest question marks in the NBA this year, right? Those two teams, those are both instances where if things go well for either of those teams out the gate, then all of a sudden it's like, all right, well, this is a team that could be top 6 in the East and they'll be a playoff team. They're going to be a really tough out in the playoffs. Yeah. But they are also two teams where if they get off to a slow start, at what point do they just be like, listen, man, we got our franchise player sitting on ice. Let's just shut this thing down. Good top of the 2026 NBA draft class. Maybe we get lucky and it's like a Tim Duncan year where you just have one bad season, you bring in a really good player and now you're back on track. The same track that you were on before it got derailed by an Achilles injury. So, I can't confidently say anything about either of those teams. I don't know if there's anything. What are you going to say?
Are you insinuating that maybe the Celtics bring, player that's from the area? They have a good season and they draft somebody who's from around. I don't know. That's what I heard. When you said David Robinson, Tim Duncan, I'm thinking Tatum DeBonsa. I don't know, though.
I'm just saying that AJ DeBonsa would love to play for the Boston Celtics. I can tell you.
No doubt about it.
He is a Boston Celtics fan. I could tell you for sure he would love to play in Boston. But I don't know if, as I was going through any of those teams, if there was any team that I mentioned that you feel strongly of, no, they are not a contender. Yes, they could be a contender. Where you stand on Orlando and Atlanta. If you give one team an edge over the other, how are you feeling?
I got a couple thoughts based on what you were saying, because as you were talking about it, I'm visualizing it. I'm looking at the list of the Eastern Conference teams in front of me and thinking about how it works. And we can start at the top. I think, Milwaukee is it's a heavy gap in between. I think Philadelphia is undefined. Too many variables. If everything goes right, like I said, it kind of feels like winning the lottery, but there is like a 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000 chance that happens. But I think that there is a chance that it happens. But the top of the conference, you said the Knicks, the Cavaliers, been there before. They're going to be expected to get it again. And I think those are the two teams where coming into the year, it would be a little bit of a disappointment if they don't make a run. I think Milwaukee, just off the strength of having Giannis, off the strength of going all in and really kind of mortgaging their future, so to speak, to bring in Miles Turner and really try to make a big win now move to take on Dame's salary that they had to, with the stretch and waive provision. That's not a move that a team that's just trying to hang around and win 45 games and, maybe make the second round makes. That's a team that's we want to win a championship because, like you said, we have a guy in our locker room who we think is the best player in the world, and we need to get the most out of that while we still can. Now, when you start talking about, Orlando and Atlanta, I throw Detroit in there, and I think that they're in that tier for different reasons. Where I think Detroit, again, Orlando and Atlanta are still going to learn each other a little bit. Atlanta, not as much. The pieces that they brought in are more on the periphery, and then bringing Jalen Johnson back, who I think could be an all-star this year. Orlando, Desmond Bane, a little more important. He's brought in to answer all their problems, so to speak, and I think he can, and I think he will. Fun 2K team, by the way. But the Pistons, I think, are there okay, we just, again, added guys in the periphery, and we also did this together last year. So I kind of grouped them together as, honestly, could they be this year's Indiana? Because I think that in very different ways, they each have a guy, whether it's Paolo or Franz, Trey, we've seen him do it before, and Cade. That kind of be what Hallie did for Indiana this past season. I can see that. The team that we haven't talked about at all, I think they're just kind of floating around, is Miami. It's a big, what are you doing? They not necessarily have an older team, but it kind of feels like they've swung and missed at a lot of the guys they thought they were going to get. They're always in on it because it's Miami and it's South Beach. Bam is a damn good player, one of the best defenders in the NBA, if not the best anchor defensively. But around that, and then Tyler Hero coming off a career year, a lot of questions around them after that. But I look at them as kind of floating around as hey, things could shake for them because they have a really good coach on the sideline there who I think I might have talked about this before, but I could see him pulling a Brad Stevens at some point and be like, all right, I did this. I won a couple chips. Chris Quinn, you got it. Pat Riley's in his 80s now. Let's just get the ball rolling. So Miami is intriguing because just as soon as they could rise, they could fall back into that play-in tournament range again and hopefully don't embarrass themselves in the playoffs like they did this past year. But that kind of brings me to what you talked about, that lower tier of teams that are interesting. And what I was going to say to you, obviously tiers there. I think Chicago, Toronto, Charlotte, those are the teams I expect to contend for the postseason. And by the postseason, I mean the play-in tournament at the very least. Washington, Brooklyn, not quite there yet. For different reasons, these teams are in the same tier. But in the NBA, it's all about your youth and your young cores. So when we talk about those teams, who are you most inspired by for the future based on what they have going on in their rosters and the youth that they have on each roster?
Yeah, that is a good, like Toronto. So you basically didn't group Toronto in with them, and I feel like that's correct. But like Toronto has the most talent. Yeah, Toronto has the most talent on their roster among those teams. Like Charlotte to me is intriguing, but it's just like, with all due respect, like how are they going to mess this up? Like, you know what I mean? Like that's how it feels. Like it's like
that's a fair question to ask. It's a fair question.
You got LaMelo Ball. I think Colin Knippel could be the starter at the 2 right off the rip to start the season. You got Brandon Miller, who looked really, really promising last year before he got injured. But then after that, it's like, you got Miles Bridges, who is still a solid player, very solid player who could help a contending team. I think maybe. I mean, I don't know. We've never really seen him in a situation where he's playing winning basketball. At the 5, it's a massive question mark. Are they going to start Moussa Diabate? Are they going to start Mason Plumlee? Is Grant Williams going to start when he's back? Like Ryan Kalkbrenner? Yeah, like they have some options there. But like, those are a lot of names. It's just like, can they fit together to make a winning team? Like, how long is this rebuild going to last? They have a lot of talent. I would say they have more young talent, more higher level young talent than like Washington does. But I think Washington is cast in a wider net. Like Bub Carrington showed some pretty promising moments last year. We've seen Bilal Coulibaly. He's had some ups and downs, but he's still a really young player who I think could develop into a solid, defense first type of player in the NBA. Alex Sarr had a pretty solid rookie season last year. Keyshawn George had a solid rookie season last year. They really just threw these guys into the fire last year and was like, all right, let's find out what we got. Let's find out what we have on this team. And I respect that. And I hope they do the same thing this year with Trey Johnson. Like he's someone who can go and get a bucket. I think he's going to be an entertaining player. AJ Johnson is someone that they got from the Bucks, who had, some promising moments last year. And then the Nets, I feel like, are completely lost. Like, I don't know what the Nets are trying to figure out. They are just, they drafted 5 players in the first round this year, 5 rookies.
We hated their draft.
Yeah. The draft was, they made 5 picks and I don't know if I liked any of them. I do like Yegor Jetman. I do think he could be solid. He's probably going to be the starting point guard or whatever. But, they got Cam Thomas and Michael Porter Jr., where you need, 4 basketballs between the 2 of them to get enough shots that they both want. Like you have Nick Claxton, who's constantly on the trade block. Noah Clowney gave you some solid minutes in the past. Like these are all teams that have random players who have shown promising flashes, but have not really done enough to prove, one, that they're worthy of, high level trade candidate to return much of anything. Besides maybe CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton in Washington, who I think they probably both get moved to contenders by the end of the season. We're kind of just rambling on about these rosters at the bottom. Toronto is my answer. Charlotte is a close second. Washington and Brooklyn, it's really like all right, what's the plan? What are we trying to do here? Is it really just roll out these young guys and hope that we throw enough darts at the dartboard that one eventually sticks? But
Chicago back in the playing as the Bulls Invitational once again.
Yeah, pretty much.
They paid Josh Giddey, by the way.
Yeah, pay Josh Giddey. They're stuck in mediocrity. I like the Josh Giddey contract. I actually thought it was a pretty favorable deal on both ends. Kobe White is in a contract year. They're gonna have to figure out what they want to do with him, because it doesn't sound like they're gonna extend him. Does Nikola Vucevic finally get traded? Like, this is a roster that is good enough to just be right in the middle of the pack the way that they have been the last couple of years. And as we've seen in the past, it's really hard to go from being a team that is stuck in mediocrity to really good. You basically have to go all the way down to the bottom to get your way back up to the top.
Yeah, Modest has to be a superstar, and I like him a lot, but he's got to be like a superstar for that to happen.
And right? I hope they throw him into the fire this year. I hope Matas Buzelis plays a ton of minutes this year and let him play through his mistakes, because I think that he is one of those players that they should be focusing on building around. But those are all teams that they're to use the same analogy, just throwing darts at a dartboard, hoping for the best. It'll be ugly, but it'll also be kind of fun to see which of those players kind of rise to the top as players that you can build around. But I think that, that group is going to be right back where they were last year, again this year.
Yeah, I was gonna say Noah Senge is the rookie in Chicago, and they took a risk in taking him, and he has to kind of pop again, throw him in the fire, and then that kind of reminded me to bring it back to Charlotte, because I was thinking about their roster, and there are a lot of interesting quirks right on their roster. Like, when I think about them, I keep forgetting they got Colin Sexton. And it's like, here's a guy who's kind of like, is he going to start the 2? Is he going to come off the bench and just be a spark plug? We know that he's not going to accept losing. If he has his way, he's not dealing with that at all. I think he's excited about having opportunities from Atlanta, so not that far from home. And then Trey Mann is a guy who basically missed the entirety of the season last year. And he's been a really, really positive asset for the Hornets. So the thing that I think that these teams have in common, because you could say the same thing about the positional overlap, and we've talked about that, the positional overlap with the Raptors and with the Wizards and with the Nets. And it's great, I think, for a young team because training camp should be battles. And these guys are fighting for playing time and fighting for jobs and all of that. And, these franchises have an opportunity to analyze and assess what we have, what we want to stick with, what we don't want to have. And I think that that's kind of one of the things we've talked about with if you're the Hornets, if you're the Nets, if you're the Wizards, if you're the Raptors to a certain extent too, right? It's like, look, like you said about the Bulls, like these teams at least haven't settled for being mediocre. They're like, you know what? We might have a lot of overlap, but we're going to see who fits our vision best, and we're going to trade who doesn't and consolidate some talent for a big name or what have you and go forward. And I think that that's the good thing that unites those teams to a different extent and kind of puts them in a good spot, at least the opportunity to have a good spot. And then to kind of bring it full circle, what we were saying, the Eastern Conference being wide open helps to where, hey, man, like similar to what we talked about with the championship, you can sit here and tell me the Hornets find a way to win 38 games next year, and you won't have to work that hard to convince me, just as soon as I could believe that they stumbled to 20, So like that range of things that could happen for most of those teams, right? Like I won't think of that range with the Bulls. Their range is 32 to 39. They're going to fall somewhere between that next year. But that's the intriguing part about the bottom of the Eastern Conference. And I also think that they're young and interesting enough that, like, on any given night, some of those upper tier teams in the Eastern Conference could come in and just lose a game to those guys because they're running all over the place.
Yeah, they'll have some fight when they want to have some fight. The Raptors gave the Celtics a couple really good games last year, and to kind of put a bow on like the bottom of the conference, like the thing that sets Toronto and Charlotte, in my opinion, above all those other teams is like they at least have guys that they can confidently say are your building blocks. Like the Hornets have to feel real good about LaMelo Ball and Brandon. The Raptors have to feel really good about Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram, honestly. Like that's, obviously they signed Jakob Poeltl and they trust him as a full-time starter, everything like that. Yeah. But I mean, like guys that you're trying to build the franchise around, like Scotty Barnes, Brandon Ingram. Like you can't say that about the Nets. They're trying to figure that out right now. You can't say that about the Wizards. They're also trying to figure that out right now. The Bulls, like I think like signing Josh Giddey like that was a step in that direction of like, all right, we believe in him, but like,
still need a stud. Don't have an all-star. Don't have an all-star.
Right.
Or not a young
one. Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I think like teams like that are still trying to figure it out. But I do kind of want to swing it back up to the Eastern Conference because in a top of the Eastern Conference, because in a similar light of like, we're talking about like, what do you know that you have at the bottom of the Eastern Conference? Like at the top of the Eastern Conference, the reason why I feel like the Knicks are the team that comes out of the East is because I have the least amount of questions about the Knicks. If anything, they are the only team in the East that I feel like had more answers than questions or more answers to their questions this offseason. They got deeper. Like you said, year 2 of the Jalen Brunson experience. What you have in OG and Mikal Bridges. You have in Mitchell Robinson. You brought in guys like Yabu, who had a really good year last year. Jordan Clarkson, who's been a vet in the same role for basically his entire career. Like Malcolm Brogdon, if he can stay healthy, you have another reliable guard there. I feel really good about that. The Cavs have not been able to get out of their own way and get past the second round of the playoffs. Darius Garland is starting the season with an injury. Max Strus is starting the season with an injury. Those are two guys that started a hell of a lot of games for Cleveland last year. You got to find someone that can fill in the gaps there. With Milwaukee, Kevin Porter Jr. is your full-time starting point guard. Kyle Kuzma was not very good after you traded for him last year. Yes, Miles Turner is an upgrade from Brook Lopez at this point in his career, and that helps a little bit with, kind of forming that starting lineup. But you're asking a lot of two guys that, have not exactly played super consistent basketball to this point in their career. Atlanta, Orlando, Detroit, we already spoke on them. We got to see it. They're young teams, a lot of talent. Things could break the right way, and one of those three teams could absolutely make a Pacers run. I think that was a great analogy that you made. One of those three teams could easily make a Pacers run next year, and would we be shocked looking back on it if that's what ends up happening? No, we wouldn't, because the pieces are in place to make it happen, but you got to see it. So that's where I land on New York as the team that I have the least amount of questions about them, and that's why I feel the most confident in their ability to be the team that represents the East in the NBA Finals this year. But, it's going to be any given night, it feels like, between these Eastern Conference teams. And that alone should be something that, even if it's not the prettiest brand of basketball, it'll be worth tuning into,
Yeah, 100%. And I think the biggest thing, as we kind of wrap it up here, we learned from this past season is that how, one, have you answered the questions that faced you or that came up based on your shortcomings last year? And two, how prepared are you for things not going your way, right? Like the Celtics, I remember we talked about, how concerned we were when they ran into some tough issues during the season, and were they complacent? Were they just bored? Were they just ready to get back to the finals? And obviously you can't predict your superstar going down with a devastating injury, and no team bounces back from that. But I think about the Thunder, right? Like, again, that's in the Western Conference, but Chet broke his hip last year. And, they withstood that. They hung in there, and it took them like half a season to get their new front court acclimated to playing next to each other. They eventually did. And thinking about that and understanding that there will be some adjustments and some growing pains that come with hiring a new head coach. But Mike Brown's been there before. And we talked about it before as far as, is he ready for the New York City spotlight? I know it's the biggest media market in the world. I know ain't nothing like New York, but also ain't nothing like coaching LeBron James. He also coached Kobe Bryant and the LA Lakers.
Yes.
Mike Brown is very much tunnel vision guy. I don't think the outside noise or those types of things are going to impact him the way that it might impact another coach who made the leap from Sacramento to New York City. Like it's a huge leap, but also he's been built for that, over the course of his career. So I do like that. I'm very curious because, think back to the basically immediate success he found leading the Kings, and, how he had their offense humming in that year where they won those games and just ended up running into Steph Curry in the first round. I think that should inspire some confidence. I know that the Knicks seem like they asked and requested permission to talk to every single person before, I won't say settling on him, but deciding on Mike Brown. But I don't necessarily think that that's an indictment of him and his preparedness or ability to lead them to better heights. I think the biggest concern with them is just, how long it takes. Because sometimes you see it. You see, like, you get out of the gates a little slow, and then maybe they start 6-4. Maybe they start, 8-7 before they kind of figure it out. But it's just withstanding maybe a rough start out of the gates to kind of learn what's going on, and not necessarily complacency, but just figuring out those things that you'd rather learn in early November. So when April comes, you've seen this before, you figured it out, you got that together. But I agree with you as far as answering the questions for sure.
And one thing that I'm kind of like, as I'm racking my brain right now, as we're talking about the Eastern Conference and going back and forth, I think one thing that is interesting and now we're looking even another season in the future. But one thing that is very interesting about the East this year is that this is a make or break season for a lot of those teams that are either A at the top or B supposed to be at the top. Like, okay, so we're gonna bring up the three teams again: Atlanta, Orlando, and Detroit. They will be status quo. They will keep humming. They are a younger version of their team. Trae Young has some contract issues that they're going to have to figure out. They're going to have to work through that. Is he getting extended? Is he going to be unrestricted free agent? Whatever the case may be. But those are three teams that have to feel pretty confident about the core that they're building moving forward, at least for, let's call it, this 2-year window. But like, if the Cavs come up short again, are they all of a sudden like, okay, we got to hit the eject button and figure this out? If the Bucks come up short again, where does that leave Giannis Antetokounmpo? If the 76ers can't slow. Or even come out the gate slow, right? Yeah, is Giannis unhappy? Like, what, that's going to be a conversation all season long. If the 76ers can't stay healthy again, at what point are they like Joel Embiid and Paul George? This is not it. The Miami Heat, like you said, just stuck in the middle of kind of no man's land right now. Like, at what point do they go, we're actually not good enough, or we don't have the pieces in place that we thought we had in Bam and Tyler Herro? And now it's Andrew Wiggins, Norman Powell, like Khalil Ware, like, Like, at what point do they go, we have to take a bigger swing at a bigger star? So there are a lot of teams right now. Like, I think the Knicks are another team that is kind of in the, obviously a different conversation than the Atlanta, Orlando, Detroit group, but like, they're pretty confident in the core they have going forward for this, next, whatever it is, 3-year window, 5-year window, whatever it is. But like, all those other teams that we just mentioned, there would be a lot of question marks and honestly probably a lot of turnover in the offseason if they come up shorter than whatever their goals are this year.
Yeah, 100%. It's going to be exciting to follow. And I think in a different way, like that conversation applies to the teams at the bottom again. We talk about what they're going to do with their coaches and like which young guys they're going to build in and believe in as well. So whatever it is, I guess to kind of just to wrap as we close here, The answer to the question I asked you at the beginning, is there things to be excited about the Eastern Conference? Absolutely, yes, because the storylines, who's going to emerge as the favorite, we never know. We could see the Pistons start the season, 13-2, and now we're talking about them in a very different light than we are right now, where we're kind of waiting and seeing. The same applies for those other teams in that wait and see realm and territory. Atlanta, Orlando. So that's exciting. And then just who's going to emerge as the favorite, who's going to come out of the Eastern Conference. And even if they don't get their national TV games on opening night and only have one on Christmas Day, which is because it's at Madison Square Garden, there's still plenty to follow in the Eastern Conference, especially we talked about with the Toronto Raptors and their pursuit getting back to the postseason and getting back to the playoffs for the first time since 2021, which 5 years, it'll be 5 years coming up. Was it 21 or 22? 22 was the last time they made the playoffs. Sorry, that first round series against the Sixers was in 2022. So coming up on 4 years still seems like kind of a while ago. Scotty Barnes' rookie season. So at least he has some of that under his belt. But as always, we will keep you locked in with that. We'll talk more about the WNBA playoffs once we're back here. A few more bi-weekly episodes before we're back to you in your feeds weekly when the NBA season gets going. I'm excited. Pretty crazy to see that the preseason is just 2 weeks away. Like, I'll be watching NBA basketball on my TV alongside WNBA basketball as well, which would be perfect for hoops fans, especially if you see the logo on my hat. If I'm tuning out of of football season by the beginning of October, it'll just be status quo for me. But maybe strange things have happened. We'll see how that goes. As always, we appreciate each and every one of you who subscribe to the podcast and listen wherever you get your podcasts, and also subscribe to us on YouTube, NBA Soundsystem Canada. We're coming up on a year there. We appreciate all the traffic that we're getting there, only up from here in year 2 on YouTube. And of course, on Instagram, NBA Soundsystem Canada is the handle as well. For Kyle Irving, my name is Gil McGregor. The NBA season is almost here, y'all. Bear with us. We're excited for it, and we hope you are too. We will catch you back here on NBA Soundsystem Canada next time.